Don't think I'm being vulgar or facetious, but 75 or 80 million pounds is not a huge amount of money for this house. It just isn't. If you look what you can buy today in prime central London for 15 or 20 million and compare it to 2 or 3 ratchets up, you'll see you get very little for your 20 million. The cost of a house like this of $80 million compared to somebody's net worth of $10 billion is neither here nor there. It's not as if they've only got $85 million and spent $80 million on a house.
What the Victorians left behind, many of us still call home, but the architecture of that very different era could be hiding behind its doors the risk of Britain slipping back to a time of two nations, that Victorian age gap between mainstream society and an impoverished underclass. Not some tiny minority either, but more than 13 million people.
When it comes down to brass tacks are normal. Breakfast, lunch and dinner, sit down and have a coffee with you, absolutely normal people, except they have one ingredient that a lot of us don't have. They have the ability to choose a property spontaneously, no matter what it costs.
New figures show the total number of children experiencing poverty increased from 3.6 million 2 years ago to 4.2 million last year. The borough with the highest rate was Tower Hamlets in London, with nearly half of children there living in poverty. Meanwhile, in the North East and West Midlands, child poverty has risen by 9%, and in the East Midlands by 7%.
And inequality is in itself unequal. The figures show a link between children receiving disability living allowance and the rate of child poverty. And in every region in the UK, children from ethnic minority backgrounds are at a higher risk of living in poverty than children from a white background.
Perception is reality. The very wealthy can buy spontaneously, whether it's a Picasso, whether it's a helicopter, whether it's a house. It doesn't need to be on their agenda. I want to buy a house, it's on my agenda. It comes to them naturally. My name is Gary Hersham. I am the head of Beecham Estates. We've been dealing with very expensive, luxurious, off-market homes worldwide for many years.
Some 71% of children living in poverty live in households where at least one adult works.
That look any good? Probably not.
Liv Erin is barely out of childhood herself.
My mum was a single parent to 2 kids, me and my twin brother. She's somebody who struggled to find work. So for much of my childhood, she worked as a waitress, long days. And, you know, the cost of childcare was just too ridiculous, too high, unaffordable. So it meant that we went to work with her often. I mean, you know, 2023 and still we see children come through the doors every day mentioning stuff that are happening at home, mentioning that they've not had the breakfast, they've not had the lunch, they haven't had anything to eat today. It's a horrible reminder that we're not really much further as we were when I was younger.
Hot food at Youth Club will be today's only meal for some children.
I'm never quite sure that I've understood what unique selling points are. The house itself is a unique selling point. You can't say, I'm buying this house because I like the bedroom and the bathroom. But if you had to say what the unique selling point is, I suspect you'd say the voluminous swimming pool, how amazing the floor-to-ceiling height is in the swimming pool. But everything's beautiful here, and a buyer will appreciate everything or appreciate nothing. Come and have a look at this wonderful staircase. How often do you see, in today's world, a 2-story solid stone staircase? Look at the intrinsic and detailed level of design. Quite magnificent. Quite magnificent. By the way, as we're passing here, I'm going to close this door, but this door leads to the staff area and the staff lift, and the main lift is to our left. Very soft, easy to sit in drawing room. The detail is amazing.
Walking into the Hope Community Hub feels like walking into the local corner shop. And that's the point. 292 households in this part of Coventry are welcomed into what's known as the Social Security Supermarket. And one woman runs this hub. Yes, one.
Any 3 items from there to there, yeah? Any 3 items, I'll hold the bag for you.
Thank you. Katie May has been coming here for a year. She's paid her £5 and she'll get £40 worth of shopping.
We have our own house, we have a mortgage, but people just assume we've got the money because we've got our own house, whereas we need the social supermarket and we go to our parents if we need help.
She cares full-time for her mother and her fiancé works. They've got 2 children, 1 and 3 years old.
What about the mental strain, Katie May? Is it something that sits with you if you're having to think about these things every day?
It's always there in the back of my mind. Am I providing enough for them? Are they getting everything they need? Are they just being able to be children, rather than having to worry about the issues that are going on that they shouldn't need to worry about? We go without new clothes. I've become well versed in sewing. If a cloth's got a hole in it, his work clothes in particular have always got holes in, but we can't afford to buy new work clothes all the time, so it's often me sewing them.
We're driving towards Rutland Gate in Knightsbridge, a house of some 60-something thousand square feet. The house has been bought by an extremely wealthy Chinese purchaser. He intends putting an extra floor on top to create a 5,000 square foot master bedroom. We are in the primest part of Knightsbridge, and this is probably the most important house in Knightsbridge, not in terms of price nor in terms of size, but in terms of location. You can see the house has been stripped out, ready for the refurbishment works. It was the house of Prince Sultan bin Abdulaziz Al Saud, who would have been king of Saudi Arabia had he not passed away. Well, you can see, come over here, you'll see little relics of the house. Look at the marble. Look at the sienna marble, the panelling of the sienna marble. Imagine everything was done to that quality throughout the house. Whether you like the style or not would have been irrelevant, but the bathrooms, the kitchen, the catering kitchen, the swimming pool.
During the pandemic, there was a £20 uplift in weekly universal credit. But when that stopped, child poverty levels shot up. Add to that rising food costs and a need for support. You can see why this one woman has a lot to think about. Still, her focus is on the families she's come to know so well.
We have some people who just are so overwhelmed they come in and cry because it's not what they expect, and they're at that lowest crisis point. We think the shop setup is important. If you're going to a food bank or accessing a service like that, you're being given a bag of food. Here we're set up as a little supermarket, gives those people that dignity of being able to shop and make those food choices for their families.
While we filmed here, people came by and chatted to Caroline like she was an old friend. This is evidently a place for connection too.
Ria Chatterjee reporting. Well, we asked the government for an interview. They declined, but told us they'd helped nearly 2 million people, including 400,000 children, out of absolute poverty after housing costs since 2010, and have launched a £94 billion cost of living support package worth £3,300 on average per household. This is why, they said, we are boosting our childcare offers, made changes to universal credit and an unprecedented increase to the national living wage. Well, joining me now is Joseph Howes, Chief Executive of the children's charity Buttle UK and Chair of the End Child Poverty Coalition. What do you make of that government response to your analysis?
We appreciate, certainly the childcare support is appreciated, but we think the government just needs to go further than that, and there's a real clear policy change that could be made. It could drag 250,000 children out of poverty immediately, and that is to scrap the two-child limit.
Just explain that. That's the limit on benefits.
Limit. So the two-child limit essentially removes benefits from any child beyond the second child in any household. So third, fourth, fifth child, you wouldn't get any benefits for those children's support.
Yeah, and predictably, your analysis shows that bigger families are more at risk of being in poverty.
Yeah, that's absolutely the case. And as you'd highlighted earlier, that if the government's aim within that policy is to ensure that parents go out and work, essentially what we're saying is, from the stats, work isn't the thing that is really helping here. 71% of those children are in working households. At least one parent is working.
Is that life is going backwards for many, with staggeringly high numbers experiencing mental health conditions.
And I think to myself, well, could things actually get any worse than what they are now?
Yeah. It works to get former prison inmates into jobs.
Getting out of the care which is provided for you, that is your biggest hurdle. Getting out of that, getting away from it and getting into something else, being able to step away from it, that is your biggest hurdle.
What we don't want to paint is a picture of a region that's on its knees without any due care for itself. But it's the gap, isn't it? It's these disparities from what's happening in one place and what's happening down the road is significantly different.
During the lockdown, at the end of lockdown, a massive rise in the amount of people drinking alcohol and the amount of people using the cocaine. So that had an effect on it. People who were lonely, bored, lost, started drinking more.
It's clear the need is growing. The report paints a picture of lives marred by family fragility, stagnant wages, poor housing, chronic ill health and crime. The most disadvantaged in Britain are no better off than they were 15 years ago at the time of the financial crash. There's evidence that moving from welfare into work just isn't worth it for many people. And the report's authors say there is no sign that help is on the way. They also say our political culture is mired in a sense of pessimism and decline, and that with a general election on the horizon, the country desperately needs answers on how to close that gap between the rich and poor. Greg Milam, Sky News.